Welcome back to Ocarina of Time 3D for the first temple that adult Link can enter. This is the Forest Temple.
I think the first thing we should note is that this dungeon is actually called the Forest Temple. And I know what you're thinking, no shit. It's the name shown on screen, it's the name of the part, you're not stupid, I get it. But the interesting thing you need to know is that it's called a temple at all. In all previous Zelda games, the term palace was used as a translation for the Japanese term shinden. This is because at the time, it was the policy of Nintendo of America to remove any overt religious references in their games. So the English name for temple was used to replace Shinjin. For Ocarina of Time, that was the first Zelda game where the policy no longer applied. So locations in the series that had Shinjin were given their literal translation of temple.
MBM laying down that sick Zelda trivia, y'all. And I'll add in my own little bit of trivia. It's funny they call it a temple at all, because it resembles more of a mansion, really, which is kind of jarring, because I've been playing a lot of Luigi's Mansion 2 recently, and I finished it last night, actually.
Either a mansion or a castle, because it's got portraits, it's got stained glass, and it's got this very quaint red carpeting all over the place.
Yeah, okay, we're done being pedants now. The temple itself, MBM, I've got a little bit of stuff to say about it, but your opinion, if you will.
My opinion is that even though this is not exclusively the death-themed temple, it's scary to me. But then again, it was scary to me as a little child, so that makes sense.
Well, you had to deal with, A, the N64 fog, the music, and the vocals in the background. I believe Nintendo used strings for that part of the MIDI track, and this is something that will actually be used again in a similar manner in City in the Sky from Twilight Princess. And let me tell you, they don't sound like strings.
Nintendo lied to you. Instead, they just took the Souls of the Damned, strung them up, and started playing those.
So what's the major gimmick for this dungeon, mate?
The main puzzle of the dungeon is to hunt down those 4 Poes who took the flames on those torches and restore the flames. The 4 Poe sisters are actually named after the sisters in the book Little Women: Joelle, Beth, Amy, and Meg. So for those of you who have any literary knowledge, that's kind of cute.
Nintendo has a big hard-on for popular culture, I found.
I don't know, but the same puzzle will later be used in Arbiter's Ground in Twilight Princess.
Yep. They also love reusing, like, puzzle pieces and whatnot.
Well, why think of anything new when you can just use what worked before and draw on that nostalgia?
Here we go. You were wondering where all the Style Childs disappeared to? They grew up and became tough as nails.
Link grew up, and then so did they.
Link grows up, and then I do.
This temple actually marks the return of a lot of previous Zelda mechanics that were gone in the first 3 dungeons, like the bubbles, the Stalfos, and the small keys. That's pretty much the biggest thing with this temple.
These Stalfosses are really tough. They're like the first genuine threat you'll really face in the game, besides the Lizalfos, I'd say. Basically, what you want to do, this is the trick that I always do, is make them jump towards you, because that leaves them vulnerable, then strike, and just try and get them in a loop like that.
Well, yeah, the adult section marks, it's the point where there's a drastic increase in enemies that require timing and specific swordplay. Or if you're Antom, you can try and cheese them with Din's Fire Spam, but we also had that worked out.
Well, it worked on the Wolfos. I thought it would work on the rest of the enemies in the temple.
Luckily, they have fireproof shields.
Damn it! And they're also skeletons, so they can't feel heat anymore.
Nope, no nerve endings. But I do like how in the final version of the game, they gave the Stalfos like little pieces of decrepit armor. Because in their beta design, they were literally just skeletons in cheesy boots with a shield and a sword.
Not quite as intimidating as they could have been.
Not quite, but instead they made the Stalfos have this like slag jaw. It's really weird. But the armor does help because it makes it look like maybe at one point they possibly could have been alive, like a certain other hero that fell to the same fate.
Yeah, Twilight Princess. And it's also a bit disconcerting because their jaws are so huge, you have to imagine what they would have looked like when they were flesh and blood.
Here's another part where we're going to use the Song of Time. They could have used this a lot more, but then it would have just turned into another Zelda's Lullaby. So what few points you do use it, I find it okay.
You don't use it as much as in Majora's Mask, obviously, but you should really get used to at least learning the notes, even though you've got, in this version at least, the notepad that you can just open whenever you want.
Well, Tom, looks like you're going to have to go over that whole fear of spiders thing, because the dungeon this wall is set up exclusively so that you can only kill 2 of the Skulltulas, meaning the third one has no other way but to stealth by.
I have to deal with the eerie music, the creepy atmosphere, and fucking spiders. Ugh, Nintendo, why do you hate me so?
They could have hated you more by throwing in Twilight Princess vine climbing mechanics.
I love that in the Mafia Mitosis review. It's like, the vine climbing is so slow, really slow, just real slow.
We could say that about a lot of stuff in this game, but that would be mean, because we can't talk bad about Ocarina of Time.
Now you want to be careful around blue bubbles, at least, because if you allow them to hit you, you will actually become cursed and you won't be able to use your sword for a little bit.
Before, all bubbles used to curse you, but now with the graphical enhancements and stuff, they made multiple bubbles. You got green, blue, red, but yeah, it's only blue are the cursors. Although I kind of wish they brought back that all bubbles cursed you, but I guess it's a fair trade for the fact that all bubbles are actually attracted to bombs. You lay them down on the ground and they swarm around it.
For some reason. And interesting fact, if you get cursed, just play the Song of Storms and it will wash away the curse, which is a nice touch, I think.
It's pretty cool. This is also one of the few dungeons that has an open air element. Like, if you look up, there's no ceiling. I'm guessing the reason they include it is because since this is the first 3-dimensional Zelda game, this actually gives players the opportunity to look up, whereas with 2-dimension, you pretty much have a ceiling down view.
Yeah, and again, it just lends credence to the fact that it kind of resembles more of a mansion than a temple, really.
Yeah, you got this courtyard. Now, this is unconfirmed, and this may be complete bullshit, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I honestly think that this tunnel well may have had some censorship work done in it. In the original, it looked as though the walls were smeared with blood, but now the decor is obviously red ivy.
That may just be graphical limitations.
It may be, because there are other parts of the game where smeared blood is still smeared blood.
Yeah, I think you can guess what we're referring to here.
And leave it to the first dungeon that includes small keys to front load us with 3 already. But I guess you need to get the point across, because if you don't have this mechanic mastered by the later dungeons, you're fucked.
See, there's those strings I was talking about. I'm sorry, but it creeps me out. It's like singing from a human, but not quite. And again, they'd repeat this in the City in the Sky and Twilight Princess, and it just creeps me out. Even more so than some parts of the Shadow Temple, a place that was explicitly designed to be creepy.
And that's what I was saying before, is that even though this wasn't meant to be the death, creepy, doomy temple, it fits it.
It's kind of like, it's a bit of a melancholy feel. It's like a deserted mansion in the center of a forest, like a deep, mystical forest. So there has to be some kind of sense of mystery, I guess, and they achieved that. But as a child, it was very intimidating to play through this kind of space.
Yeah, maybe I was weird when I was a kid, but when I sort of put the dots together that this could have been a mansion, I almost thought, like, what happened to the owners? And that, to me, I guess, was also a source of creepiness.
Again, the stealth fossils.
So it wouldn't be a Zelda game unless we had block puzzles, so throw them in, of course.
Just remembering when we were recording this on the live stream, it's like, where do you want me to push the block? Left? Okay, Link's left or my left?
The left up. Well, you think this is bad? In the Master Quest version, the puzzle is exactly the same. The solution is the same. But they throw in 2 extra blocks that serve no other purpose but to cause confusion.
Goddamn fake cut blocking blocks.
That's terrible. Also notice that Tom just walked past that ladder twice. Take note of it. It's very important.
Yeah, and also in Master Quest, you'll have to utilize the Song of Time to actually make blocks appear, so you can do a little platforming section. It kind of threw me for a loop the first time.
Although that's interesting. Just throwing blocks in to, throw you off, that's stupid. But, using a song to bring blocks for platforming, that's awesome.
The first dungeon in the game, the Deku Tree, should have, taught you how to, maneuver through a 3D environment. This one kind of gets you to grips with multi-level block puzzles, which is something you really need to become accustomed to, especially by the third dungeon that Adult Link can visit.
Oh man, those are going to be fun times. But yeah, the solution to this puzzle is that you want to go up that ladder first to move the red block, Then you can go up the blue block you push and put the red block in its final position. That threw somebody off when he was trying to record it.
Well, you said that a lot more eloquently here than you did in the recording session, mate.
I was like, the ladder. What ladder? The one you walked by. What ladder? The one you just walked by again. What ladder? You know what?
The ladder in Jabba Jabba's belly? No. Oh, you idiot.
No, go back there. You can go there anyways as adult Link. Way to go, Grizzo. So, we mentioned how the music gets kind of reused in City of the Sky. That's not the only thing that gets reused about this temple. Snow Peak Ruin also draws upon this as an inspiration of using a mansion, castle, pretty much a not temple as a temple. And you know what? It works. I love when temples don't actually look like a temple. I mean, Snow Peak Ruin was literally just the mansion that the Yetis were living in, and it worked so well.
I've said many a time that I love, like, when games use residential settings, or just, like, public spaces, like, I know, shopping malls, houses, mansions, like you said, and so on, and devise a way to create puzzles and whatnot from it. It's just very aesthetically pleasing, and it's a nice change of pace.
Tom, we did it! The tunnel to Termina! Onward to darker, more atmospheric adventures!
Yes! Hooray! Oh, it's just ladder room.
Also, Navi, seriously, we haven't even left the room twice. You've already interrupted me.
Yeah, word of advice, don't dawdle, otherwise you'll find yourself transported back to the start of the mansion, shall we say.
Yeah, that room is pretty much the source of what I would assume to be a lot of kids' first instances of nightmare fuel, the Wall Masters.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yep. Mini-boss time! Guess what? It's another Stalfos, because you really need to learn how to kill these things if you want to beat later enemies.
Yeah, now you see that hole in the center of the floor? He can walk over it, you can't, so I would advise staying near the door if you can, and, just spamming the whole leap stab strategy.
Well, it's because he's evil, and I guess that's Nintendo's slight way of letting you know that evil is better than good, because evil can say fuck gravity.
Yeah, I guess.
And once you killed him, it's on to phase 2, which is more Stalfos!
Hooray for originality!
The dungeons get better about making cooler mini-bosses, we promise. But be quick about killing these guys, because if you kill one of them and take too long to kill the second, the first one will actually be revived, because his bones will still remain.
Now, you'll see me drop a bomb here. Now, I didn't realize at first that you don't actually have to do this in Ocarina 3D. You know, it'd been so long since I played the original. My mind kind of reverted back to the handheld Zeldas, where you do have to drop bombs sometimes to kill Stalfosses completely.
Oh, that's where you got it. See, when I was trying to tell you about, once again, use good swordplay, time your attacks, you're like, oh, this is where I use bombs to kill him, right? It's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever... Wait... That's actually not that bad of an idea. You could booby trap the whole room just by leaving bombs all around the Stalfos, and it inflicts damage, so why not? And the temple item is the bow and arrow, the staple of the Zelda series.
Definitely an iconic Zelda item, yeah. And personally, I'd recommend using the gyro controls, because it's much more fluid, and to be quite honest, I find the circle pad to be a bit clunky, as opposed to a regular analog stick. I don't know, that's just me.
Now, for most runs, most speedruns that will even step foot in the Forest Temple, getting the bow is pretty much the last thing you do in the temple before you go back to that main room, use the hookshot to clip through the staircase in the very back, go out of bounds, and fall into the boss room.
That was my mind, folks.
Yeah, all you need to know is that the way Ocarina of Time is designed is that the loading zone for boss rooms are always present. Even if you're like on the 5th floor and the boss room is on the basement, the loading zones are always there. It's like a priority. But since this is a playthrough and apparently people don't like watching people fall into the abyss and instantly appear in a boss room, I guess we'll be here a bit longer. So here we're finally actually tackling the puzzle about restoring the flames to the main room. The first two pose have the exact same strategy. You pretty much don't want to lock onto them. I know, it goes against everything you've done with all the previous enemies, but locking onto them will cause them to disappear or remain invisible for longer. Here Tom was using his strategy, which is very heart conscious. Like, you will not get damage if you do this. You just have to hit them with 5 arrows and they're done.
Yeah, if you lock onto them, I found that they'll start to spam like a spinning attack, and that just makes an already tedious fight more tedious, really.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't get how Nintendo was able to program that, but they're like, oh, they're locked on? Well, use the spinning attack. Have we done the spinning attack? Well, then stay invisible more. It's like, why? It's like, okay, you only need to punish me in one particular way for locking on. I've learned my lesson. God, I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm glad they went with like a different kind of gameplay strategy for the third and fourth pose, but I think it was a bit tedious fighting the first two in the same manner.
Well, it gave us an opportunity to show off multiple strategies with dealing with the exact same enemy. And I don't know exactly how far away you have to be from a portrait before they hop, but I usually just stay one level off, and that usually is enough.
Yeah, so if it's on a floor above you, just like shoot it from the bottom of a staircase.
It's to make sure that you actually learn to aim a little bit. A lot about this dungeon just comes off as, it's a tutorial, but in a really good way. Like, most people would not think of the Forest Temple as a tutorial level, but when you think about all the different tactics and strategies that you have to pick up just to progress, it actually works effectively.
Now, I'm not sure how true this is, but I've heard if you throw a Deku Nut at the pose when they're in their invisibility state, you can actually knock them out of it, but it's got to be like frame perfect, and it's got to be before they start doing that twirl move again, and you don't have much time before they do that, unfortunately.
With the last Poe, he went with the bow and arrow strat. This Poe, he decided to use my strat of just using the Master's Sword. It only takes 2 jump slashes, but when you just use regular slashes, we found out that both strategies equal about the same amount of time. So it's your pick.
Well, you know, Mexi, variety is the spice of life, and even if you're talking over video games for a living, you gotta mix it up every now and then.
But my strategy involves you using jump slashes, which would have only taken 2 hits, but you went and used regular, so that's going to take about 5, so at the end of the day, they both equal the same amount of time.
Oh, everyone's a critic. Now, I criticise Skyward Sword a lot for, you know, some of the decisions it made in regards to gameplay, pacing, etc. But I've got to say, I loved how Skyward Sword combined the compass and the map together. Because I don't know how it was in older Zelda games, because most of the retro ones I played were stuff like Link's Awakening, the Oracle games and so on, but from Ocarina onwards, you would get the map and the compass separately, and it was kind of tedious, because when you have the map, you don't know where any of the treasure is. And if you just have the compass, you know, obviously don't have a layout of the dungeon. With Skyward Sword, they combine the map and the compass together, so you're only collecting one treasure. And it's much more streamlined, and it's much more efficient.
So there's going to be a few jump cuts coming up in this part, and they are entirely my fault. See, when we were recording this part, I was actually giving Tom the instructions on how to get through the dungeon. It was only then that I realized that I really only have this dungeon up to the bow and arrow memorized. I mean, seriously, whenever I play this game, I just get the bow and glitch into the boss chamber, so I completely forgot about taking into account the best mechanic of this temple.
Yeah, you can shoot that switch and make the floors become walls and the walls become floors.
It's all very majestic. It was actually a mechanic that was introduced in Link's Awakening with the Eagle's Tower and was then reused in Majora's Mask in the Stone Tower Temple. And in my opinion, that temple did it the absolute best.
Definitely, mate. And might I just say, the boss key and the boss key chest, I don't know why, but they have some of the best graphical enhancements in all of Ocarina 3D. They look fucking majestic.
It's pretty much a rule of thumb that if it's something in the adult section and it's shiny, it kicks absolute ass in the 3D version.
The lock to the boss door in the adult dungeons looks similarly snazzy. I don't know, I guess they wanted to fancify it up. Ooh, coming up now is an enemy that creeps the ever-loving shit out of me. Or, at least it used to. Now it's just kind of comical in the way it rises up like a UFO and just bobs towards you. This is the Floor Master.
It really is sad going back and realizing how pathetically easy it is to avoid this enemy, especially given how much trouble it gave me as a child. I mean, for one, the room that you encountered is actually really small, so you don't have to deal with him for a long period of time, and it's easily avoided by just running around in a circle or even climbing onto a ladder. It's like, young me, why were you such an idiot? You know what? Just forget it.
Not the hardest enemy ever. Really, the only tricky part about them is killing all their little baby versions before they reform back into the proper thing. Sadly, Din's Fire won't work on the adult version, but what are you going to do? I just like spamming fire, I guess.
Well, I'll give credit where credit's due. I've never used it, so it's actually a bit refreshing to see someone use these spells and actually use them effectively.
Like here, for example.
Yeah, see, this was an interesting, if not occasionally frustrating puzzle where you would have to stand on one of these rotating platforms, then you had to line up an arrow shot through the torch to melt the ice around the ice switch. But Tom here decided to ruin the entire playthrough by just ignoring the developer's intentions and using Din's fire.
Hey, there's a similar set piece in Woodfall Temple, the first temple in Majora's Mask, where you have to, you're on a rotating platform, and you have to fire an arrow through a torch and hit, like, a candle wick or something to open up a door, and I could never line that up properly, and it was so frustrating. So you know what? If there's a cheap way available, I'm going to take that path, unfortunately.
It is definitely the issue with a lot of the early 3D Zelda games is that you have to guesstimate your arrow shots. You're not really given a target. So here's one of the best things about the Forest Temple that I know of. There's actually a lot of evidence from beta builds, so people going in and hacking, and also quotes from the developers that supports the idea that the Forest Temple was originally going to be the Wind Temple, but was changed in the final version of the game. That being said though, there are still remnants of the temple's original purpose left in the game. Namely, the emblem that's found throughout the temple and that's on the Forest Medallion itself. It looks kind of like a wind vortex or a fan, give or take.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, also, when Navi tells Link to go to the temple, she says an evil wind is blowing from the direction of the Forest Temple. Why she's using the word wind? Well, there you go. It's also believed that Fado, that Kokiri girl that we talked to way back in part 1, that she was going to be the Sage of the Temple, not Saria, thus making her the Sage of Wind. This is kind of supported because Nintendo from Ocarina of Time onwards had a tendency of implementing unused items from one Legend of Zelda game and using it in a later one. In this case, Fado, the Sage of Wind from Wind Waker, would just be a recycled form of the Ocarina of Time Fado.
My mind exploded twice in one part. Kudos, Mexi.
And it didn't even have to involve going out of bounds.
This is a weird room. It seems like really out of place in context of the temple as a whole. And for one thing, it locks first person, so it's kind of awkward.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to fluff up an already moderately paced temple.
Okay, if you were bored with the first two poses kind of, playing out in the same manner, this one kind of mixes it up a little bit with a block puzzle. Well, I was half right, I guess.
Well, they try to switch it up by throwing in that red herring block. Luckily, it's not too confusing. I mean, if you can't tell the difference between it and the other four, God help you with later video games.
Now, in Master Quest, it's the same puzzle, but they just rearranged the blocks in a different manner, in a more difficult to put together, given the amount of time kind of way, but it's still pretty easy.
They actually kept the time limit the exact same. Apparently, the positioning is supposed to increase the difficulty.
Maybe next time set the blocks on fire.
Holy shit, that would actually be really interesting. Or have you used Din's fire on the block. I think that would make you happy.
Definitely.
But once you solve it, you have to fight Amy, this Poe, just the exact same way that you finished off her previous two sisters.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to take a ghost called Amy seriously. It's like taking Casper the Friendly Ghost seriously in a battle.
Apparently Nintendo was expecting you to take her seriously because they brought her back in Oracle of Seasons. In the dungeon, the Explorer's Crypt, you fight two Poe sisters as the mini-boss, and they're named Amy and Margaret. While there's not a Margaret in Ocarina of Time, there's another Poe with a fairly similar name, so I'm just going to credit them as being the same ones.
Man, I remember nothing about Seasons or Rages. When they come out this summer on the 3DS eShop, I gotta pick them up.
Maybe we'll have a live stream of that. I like how you start with the sword and then end with the bow. We're just gonna keep the variety going here.
Only here at Hellfire Commentaries. Navi, I just took out the third Poe sister. The next one's in the main chamber. I'm not lost. I don't need help. I mean, there was a point where I found Navi to be really annoying, and then I played Skyward Sword, and obviously you know how I feel about the partner character in that game, and it made me appreciate Navi more. In 3D, while she doesn't do it all the time, Navi does sometimes state, "Oh, why don't you go find a Sheikah Stone?" when you obviously don't need one. It's just a bit annoying, really.
You can see the last Poe in first person, and it appears that she's actually crying. This could very well be because she said that we killed off all her other sisters. Well, killed them off again. They were ghosts, so I'm not entirely sure how death works.
Yeah, you ever heard of the phrase crocodile tears, Mexi? I think that applies here.
This is the final puzzle. You have to figure out which of these 4 is the real Meg. And it's pretty easy. Whichever one adds some more flair by spinning around, that's the real one, and the other 3 are just illusions.
Don't think you can spin attack and take them all out at once. They'll just bob and weave around your sword spin, unfortunately.
That's actually kind of clever on Nintendo's part, was to have it so that the spin attack wasn't very effective. But you can just strike the real Meg using the Master Sword, use arrows, and you can even use the hook shot, though you will have to account for the hook shot's delay, as that could actually cause you to hit one of the illusion Megs, giving the real Meg a chance to slap you across the face. They actually brought the Poe sisters back in Majora's Mask, all 4, and you can fight them in the Spirit House to earn a piece of heart.
Nothing like a drink of milk in the Forest Temple when your hearts are full.
Remember kids, calcium helps build strong bones and strong teeth, which will allow you to take down darkness more easily.
There is a reason for this, trust me. There is always a reason.
Also, beating the 4 Poe sisters causes the elevator in the center of the main dungeon to reveal itself. And let it be known in this part that I, MBM, fucking hate elevators in Zelda games. Because it's clearly a reference to the elevators in the Temples and Adventure of Link.
Yeah, I remember you nearly pulling your hair out during training sessions for Zelda 2. MBM was going to be the one playing Zelda 2 for the Zelda-thon. But unfortunately, it seems we might have to give that one a miss. It is too hard, and we are, unfortunately, tech casual. Now, in regards to this puzzle, this one gave me so much trouble the first time I played Ocarina of Time. And while it's not that hard, just the perspective and the layout of the room can make what you have to do kind of confusing. Basically, this is how I figured it out. Take a look at the map. What you have to do is push the stones counterclockwise. Do it once, then you'll find a button. Press that button. Then go back to the blocks and push them counterclockwise again, and you'll find another switch. Then go back to the block once more, push it again, and you'll find the last switch. Then simply turn around and go through the door opposite of where the switch is. And hey presto, you should find the boss door. It might take a while. Took us about, 6-7 minutes recording the footage for this. Just keep trying and you'll eventually get it.
You guys have no idea how hard it is to try and dictate this type of puzzle to another person. Especially Tom. It was more of a trial and error thing, really. Yes, even the boss door lock itself got an awesome graphical enhancement, because let's face it, the original lock was nothing more than a gold padlock with horns glued to it.
And weirdly, at this point, the Forest Temple turns from a kind of pseudo-mansion place to more of an art gallery, really. But the most least successful art gallery in history. Like, they literally have just photocopied the same painting and hung it up all around the boss arena. No wonder this place was put out of business and then just abandoned in the middle of a forest. No one wanted to come visit it. Whoa! Suddenly Ganondorf out of fucking nowhere. Is this it, folks? Is this the final boss of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D? Nope, just fucking with you. It's Phantom Ganon. And apparently he did not take kindly to those comments about me dissing the art gallery, because now he's going to utilise the same type of painting to try and kill Link.
I gotta say, it's a really effective move, at least from a story-wise perspective, to have Phantom Ganon appear as Ganondorf from 7 years ago. You as the player know that the real Ganondorf seized power, but as far as what happened to him since then, you really have no idea. So to have him appear in his younger form, it's almost like the game is trying to tell you he's immortal or ageless, and it's a really cool idea. As for how to take out Phantom Ganon, the first phase consists of utilizing the bow, since it is the dungeon item, and attacking him as he comes out of the painting. He spawns a copy and tries to trick you into attacking the fake one. Just pay attention to which one is more detailed, and you should be fine. The fake one will also turn around and go back into the painting just before jumping. So just be on your toes and try and be quick about it.
He is a tricky little blighter like that, yeah. Now here's the part that most people remember about the Phantom Ganon fight. The Energy Ball tennis thing. Yeah, I don't know its actual name, but this will be brought up in a few other Zelda games like Wind Waker, you know, that version of Phantom Ganon. Phantom Hourglass, with the sisters on the ghost ship and so on. And the cool part is that, like you can see here, you can use an empty bottle to reflect the blast back. It's such a cool little trick, and it's the little touches like this that help to make Zelda games so endearing to me. Just like in Twilight Princess, if you whip out the fishing rod during the final fight, you can actually distract the final boss. It's actually pretty funny when you see it.
You'll notice Phantom Ganon is actually wielding a trident and wearing a pig's mask. This is a reference to his previous incarnations where when he battled Link, his weapon of choice was a trident. I'm not sure what its significance is in terms of Zelda as a whole, but you can sort of think of it as a complete opposite of the Master Sword. This design also has a bit of foreshadowing to the final boss, but that's for a later part way down the line. This spiraling firework attack is actually pretty rare, and I'm surprised Tom was able to capture it for the playthrough. It's kind of easy to dodge since it is telegraphed to hell and back, but if it hits you, it's gonna take off 3 hearts of damage. And if you're doing a 3-heart run, don't have any fairies, you're pretty much dead on arrival.
Luckily though, there's a few fixed spots in the forest temple where you can actually get a fairy. And if you have like 2 to 3 bottles, like me, you can just go back as many times as you like and stock up. And there you have it, the Phantom Ganon fight is done and dusted. Not the hardest fight in the world, but they will become trickier as adult Link progresses through the story. What I mostly got out of this fight is that it's trying to teach you how to utilise the bow effectively in first person mode, and also, the whole energy tennis volleying thing, because the final boss will require you to be proficient at both things, trust me on this one.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I was gonna say. I mean, this fight was one of the few sections of the game that I would go back and replay over and over just because of how fun the fight was. But before we leave the temple, I got one more thing to bring up, so bear with me, but remember a few parts ago when I brought up that Ocarina of Time was originally going to have Ganondorf's castle serve as a central hub, and it was going to use paintings as a portal system? I think having Phantom Ganon jumping in and out of the paintings may have been a leftover of that idea being carried over to the final game. But as a whole, the Forest Temple is one of the best parts of Ocarina of Time. The eerie atmosphere is perfect, the temple does a good job of increasing the difficulty since, well, Link is an adult now, and I can't say it enough, but I love the fact that the interior design is more reminiscent of a mansion than your stereotypical dungeon.
And surprising no one, the Sage of the Temple is indeed Saria. Ocarina of Time is a great game, but subtle it is not. Expect the sages of all the temples that are coming up to be either A, someone you've already met, or B, at least in one case that I can think of, someone you'll meet upon actually entering the temple itself.
It shouldn't surprise me at this point, but yes, even the symbol on the Forest Medallion was altered in this version. Originally it resembled the Bombos Medallion from A Link to the Past, but in the 3D version the medallion only has 3 spirals rather than 4. Perhaps to avoid confusion with the Bombos Medallion, but I've heard from other people that it makes the medallion resemble the Kokiri Emerald more. But there's another possible yet infinitely stupider reason that, given Nintendo's history of censorship, it is possible that if you look really hard and are just trying to find stupid shit to be offended by, the original design kinda, sort of, maybe looks like a swastika.
Ah yeah, just like that one dungeon layout in A Link to the Past that kinda sorta resembles a swastika. I don't know, some people will just read into things whatever they want, really. And there he is, the Deku Sprout. Oh, he's so chibi! Now, a lot of people like to theorise that this Deku Sprout would go on to be the Deku Tree from Wind Waker, since obviously there's around, I think it was about 100 years between both games. So it's possible that this little sproutling could grow up into a massive tree in that time, and I guess that would either make the Kokiri, in Kokiri Forest, the Koroks from Wind Waker, or maybe the Koroks are just closely related to them. I don't know, they're plant people, okay? I can't give you the whole physiology and shit, I'm just an online commentator for Christ's sake.
As far as the revelation about Link being a Hylian goes, it's kind of neat, I guess. All it does is explain why Link was able to grow up and why it took him so long to get a fairy, since obviously he's not a true Kokiri. Other than that, it's more of a plot device than anything else. It won't get brought up much throughout the rest of the game.
Don't get us wrong, it's not a bad piece of storytelling, and it works perfectly fine. But for me at least, when I was first playing it back in the day, I kind of just took the idea on board and then forgot about it for the most part. Getting to go through a bunch of new, more challenging temples with what is essentially a new main character had more of an impact than finding out Link's true race, really. Although, to be fair, I probably should have guessed he was a Hylian from the start. Getting his fairy light, being able to leave the forest at all. Yeah, the Zelda games don't have the most complicated stories in the history of video games, but at least they make up for it with bucket loads of charm. That much is certain.
You may start experiencing some deja vu, as the next few temples pretty much play out thematically identical to the 3 child dungeons. Now, I get that this level progression would go on to become a staple of the Zelda franchise. I mean, they use it again in Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Minish Cap, Spirit Tracks. I'm probably forgetting more, so correct me if I'm wrong. But it would have been nice if they mixed up the level order instead of simply repeating the same dungeon types that Child Link had.
I can sort of see what you're getting at here. They basically use the same set of dungeons, or at least the same themed dungeons, to help ease the player into adult Link as a character, and both, his style of gameplay, the greater level of challenge, instead of just going like, okay, we're going to start with Shadow, Ice, Spirit. Actually, that would be pretty sweet, and I hope in future Zelda games they actually give us a greater level of freedom when it comes to choosing what order we can actually do these dungeons in. But for the time being, Kokiri Forest is saved. We'll never be seeing it again, but we'll be seeing you all next time when we head towards Death Mountain once more and to the Fire Temple. See you all then.